Okay, so here we are. We are on topic 2, and I'm going to go through the notes for this packet. It's what is life or what is biology. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so, all right, so what is biology? Well, biology is simply the study of living things, or the study of life, same thing. And this includes even the smallest organisms, unicellular. If something is unicellular, we know that that is made up of one cell. Example of this, would be your bacteria, your fungi. These would be unicellular, right? And then you also have things that are multicellular, or that they're made up of more than one cell. And that would be like your plants and your animals, right? So they're all living, but they're just made up of different amounts of cells. So a living thing is called an organism. And in order to keep itself alive, all organisms are going to do things, right? They're gonna do things that they want to, so that they help themselves stay alive, right? So the organisms are made up of cells, and cells will carry out life processes. So a life process, or life process, sometimes they call it a life function or a metabolic process. Right? These are just basically the things that a cell will do to keep itself alive. Remember that if your cells die, then you die. So all living things want to try to do is just try to keep themselves alive. That's pretty much what is driving life on Earth, keeping themselves alive. Right? So you have unicellular versus multicellular. Pretty simple. Unicellular is composed of one cell, and we also say that this is a simple organism. We say that it's simple because it only has one cell. It's like only made up of one part. Think of it that way. And you have multicellular, composed of more than one cell. And we call these organisms complex. Complex. The reason why we say that they're complex is because they're just more complicated. You can think of the word complex as complicated. Um, that means that they just have more going on. So they typically have tissues and organs. So that's an important thing to know, that if something is a one-celled organism like a bacteria or an amoeba, they're very simple. What they can really do with their body is limited versus something that has many cells. And here we have an example of something multicellular. So the last part here, unicellular and multicellular organisms both accomplish life processes in different ways. This is important to remember. What this means is that all living things will carry out life functions. All of them will do this, right? But they're just going to accomplish them in different ways. An example of this, right? Let's look at plants. And let's look at everything that's not a plant, so non-plants. Right? All living things are going to need energy, right? They're going to need to get food, nutrition. So let's look at plants. How are plants going to get their nutrition? So you're probably thinking, well, I know that plants need to get their nutrition from the sun, right? They are going to make their own sugar through this process of photosynthesis. Now, anything that's not a plant, they can't do photosynthesis, so they're not going to use the sun. They actually just get it from consuming other organisms or from eating. I've never seen a plant eat unless you're talking about a Venus flytrap, which is a special situation there. Venus flytraps, believe it or not, they cannot get they don't have enough nutrients in the environment that they live in because it's very extreme. So they actually eat other insects in order to make up for the nutrients that they can't find in the soil. So that's an adaptation that helps them survive. But they are capable of doing photosynthesis. Okay, so let's move on to the next page here. Anything that is alive, or anything that was once alive, is considered to be biotic. So, for example, if you have a tree and the tree is dead, the tree is not non-living. It's still considered biotic because it was alive at one point. Something that is not alive is called abiotic. So the prefix a, this means without. So abiotic is something without life. Water, oxygen, blood, rocks, these things are not alive. Right? So if we're looking at these two questions, You can pause the video if you want to try and answer them before you move on. So in 3 seconds, well, let's say 5 seconds, I'm going to give you the answer. So you can pause it now, and then you can press play when you're ready. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The answer to number 1, all living things are composed of cells. And then the answer to number 2 is number 1. A multicellular organism has organ systems to carry out life functions, but if something is single-celled or unicellular, they also carry out life functions, but they don't have the organ systems to do it. So again, they're simple organisms, and they're both staying alive, they're both carrying out their life processes, but they're doing it in different ways. And we're going to move on. Okay, how can you tell when something is alive or not? Well, to tell when something is alive or not, right, all living things share the same characteristics, and these are called the life processes or the life functions. I went over this already. I'm going to go over 7. However, there's definitely more than 7. There's more things that you could look at. We're just going to focus on 7 just to get ourselves started with this topic. And let's move on. Okay, so all living things, the first thing that all living things do, they have organized bodies. What I mean by organized bodies is that, if they are multicellular, they're going to have tissues, they're going to have organs, right, etc. And if they are a single cell, guess what? They're organized too. Because even inside a bacteria, they're going to have DNA, they're going to have a cell membrane or cell parts. And the parts of a cell, these are called our organelles. So inside the body of a living thing, everything's organized almost like a factory. Think of it as like a factory, like a robot. It has all these different parts that are making the whole thing work. All living things regulate their body. The word regulate means that they're going to control their body. So they're able to control what happens throughout their bodies. All living things will grow and develop. So people tell me, well, Miss Santana, once you reach a certain age, you don't grow, which is true. I'm definitely not going to grow. I'm short, but my cells are growing. For example, if I cut myself, that will grow back. The cells there will grow back, and I won't be bleeding anymore. So growth, it doesn't necessarily have to be that you're getting taller. It means that the cells are actually reproducing inside of your body. Utilize energy. All living things need energy in the form of ATP. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Respond to stimuli. So all living things respond to stimuli. This means that they are responding to anything that will cause a reaction. Oops, sorry about that. I made a really loud noise. So anything that causes a reaction is a stimulus. All living things will reproduce. We'll talk more about that later. And evolve, which is basically living things will change over time. Okay, so let's look at these questions. The first one, which is a biotic factor in the environment of a freshwater fish? So if something is biotic, you know that that's something that has to be alive. Light is not alive. Water is not alive. Mud is not alive. All right, here we go. Algae is alive. And if you're not sure what algae is, look at this key word here, growing. So if it's growing, it's alive. Next one here, a certain plant requires moisture, oxygen, carbon dioxide, light, and minerals in order to survive. This statement shows that a living organism depends on, look at these things, moisture, oxygen, carbon dioxide. These things are clearly not alive. They are abiotic. So the fact that we need these things, right, the fact that we are made of what I mentioned before, stardust, leftovers from the universe, from other parts of the universe, we know that living things are actually made up of non-living things, which is crazy. To think that something that's alive is made up of many parts that are not alive. So these are all abiotic factors. Number 7, what are the abiotic factors that characterize a forest ecosystem? Okay, so here it says light and biodiversity. So number 1, even if I don't know what this is, miss, I don't know what that means. Well, you do know what the word bio means. So you know that the word bio means life. So it can't be this. The second one here, temperature and water. These are definitely not alive, so I might keep that as my answer. Type of procedures, that's weird. Procedures are basically steps. And a decomposer, if you remember from previous science class, a decomposer is a living thing that breaks down other things. And then here, a heterotroph, this is an organism that does not make its own food. So the only thing here that's not alive, abiotic, will be the temperature and the amount of water. These are abiotic factors. Okay, the next one here, order. All living things are organized. Okay, all living things are organized. So the smallest living thing that exists is a cell. So the simplest living level is the cell and increases in complexity. Okay, so the smallest thing that we have that is alive is a cell. And then we have the order here. So cells form tissues, tissues form organs, organs form systems, and the systems will form the whole organism. So this is, again, this is organization. This is kind of like your body saying, all right, we're going to put this in this place and this in this place, and we're all going to work together to accomplish the task of keeping this thing alive. I want to keep this zebra alive, and that's basically the way that it works out for most multicellular organisms. Remember that if something is a single cell, it doesn't have tissues or organs, it doesn't have all of that, but it still manages to stay alive. Okay, so the next one here, which sequence of terms is in the correct order from simplest to most complex? Oh, I'm sorry, you guys actually don't have this question because I felt like it was repetitive, so we're going to just skip that. Okay, regulation. Okay, controlling. All living things will respond to stimuli to survive in the external environment. So when we talk about a stimulus and a response, here's an example, right? Let's say that someone shines a light in my eye, right? Someone shines a light in my eye. The light is the stimulus. It's something that is coming from the outside and I have to respond to it. So if it's coming to my eye, how will I respond? Well, usually I might wink, right? My pupils will close. And these are, these are things that kind of happen automatically. So all living things, when something happens outside of them, they're going to respond in some kind of way, okay? So that's what we talk about with stimulus and response. And then in terms of regulation or controlling their bodies, right? A stimulus or stimuli, environmental factors that can cause a response from living things, right? Causing a response. Light, sound, a predator, right? If, let's say there's a mouse, right? Here's the little mouse guy. Okay, the mouse is happy chilling in the field. And let's say that here there's Mr. Cat, right? Okay, Mr. Cat. So if the cat is the predator and the cat pounces over here, the mouse is going to respond. The mouse isn't just going to stand there because all living things want to survive. So the mouse is going to start running. So the stimulus is the cat actually jumping and pouncing, and then the response is for the mouse to run. Another example here, right? Here's a stimulus. Let's say you have something sour in your mouth. You're immediately going to try to spit it out. So that's a stimulus and a response. Back in the day when we were also when we weren't as evolved and we didn't have civilization, or the early humans, they knew that something was poisonous because if it had like a soury taste, you would spit it right out. And that's actually where that came from. So obviously lemons aren't poisonous, but there are other things that are, and they usually have a sour taste. It's a way of protecting ourselves. And then here's another example of a stimulus and response, the Venus flytrap, right? The Venus flytrap actually has these tiny hairs on the surface of its leaves, and the tiny hairs can tell when something's there. They are kind of like receptors telling the plant, hey, there's something here on top of me. Because of course the plant can't see, so how does the plant know when something's there? Right? It can feel it because of the hairs. So when a little caterpillar, for example, gets on the hair of the Venus flytrap, the hairs that are on the surface of the leaf, the response, right? The response right here is for the plant to close. So the plant will close and it will trap its food. So this is the stimulus, right? The stimulus is this getting on the plant's receptors, on the plant's little hairs, and the response is for the plant to close. So again, all living things will control their body, and they will control their body in different ways. Right? Look at how the plant controls this, but it's still responding to a stimuli. Right? So here, an example of a reaction to a stimulus. If you want, you can pause the video now while you think about your answer and then press play later. But the answer here is Number 2, eyes blinking due to smoke in the air. Number 10, which statement describes an organism responding to a stimulus? All right, so in this example, I would say number 3. You have a sound, and the sound then is actually jumping. Number 11, a change in the external or internal environment of an organism is known as a stimulus. Okay, moving forward. Right, living things must regulate or control their internal environment. We know that. We know that things must control what's inside of them. They must keep their body within a normal condition. So here we have something called homeostasis. It's a process of balancing an organism's internal environment. Okay, so water, salt, temperature, right? It's about keeping balance, right? So when we talk about keeping the body balanced, what we mean is that if you don't have the right amount of water, the right amount of salt, right temperature, if everything isn't within what's called a normal range, if everything isn't normal in the body, and this goes for all living things, right? If something is not normal, then there's a disease, right? So a disease is when you can't maintain homeostasis, right? So when you can't maintain homeostasis, which is that balance, right? What are some things that need to be balanced? Let's think about this, right? Let's think you're going to the doctor. And you go to the doctor, what's the doctor looking at right away? Right, think about this. They're gonna look at your blood pressure, okay? The doctor's gonna look at your pulse. The doctor's gonna look at maybe your temperature, your body temperature, because these things are, they should be normal. And they're going to be a little bit different for everybody. Maybe some people might be 98.5, some people might be 98.7, but we know that there's a range that should be normal. So if you're not staying within a normal range, then you're not maintaining homeostasis or that balance inside. Metabolism. Okay, so metabolism, all of the body's chemical reactions. Okay, so pretty much everything that the body has to do is a chemical reaction. So breaking things down, building things up. This is pretty much the breaking down and building up of materials inside of the body. So, for example, when you have to digest something, right, like this apple, that's a chemical reaction. In a chemical reaction, what's happening is you're either breaking something apart or putting together in the body. Okay, so here's how it works. You know that you have a fast metabolism if you can break things down and put things back together quickly. That's someone who is healthy, who their body runs very efficiently. Now, your metabolism as you get older starts to slow down. What that means is that it's harder for you to recover. It's more difficult as you get older to be able to accomplish everything that the body needs to do to keep you alive. So that's why, for example, someone that's my age, maybe like 28, it's more difficult for me to lose weight than when I was 14 because my metabolism has slowed down. It is more difficult for my body to digest food, and it is more difficult for my body to put things back together in my body, especially the way that, with the way that I eat and whatnot. So what basically happens is how efficiently, how well your body runs. Think of yourself as a machine. If the machine is running well, then your metabolism is good. If the machine is running really slowly, like let's say a computer is running slowly or your phone is running slow, the internet's going slow, that means the metabolism is slow, right? And there are definitely a lot of things that you can do to improve your metabolism. It's not like it stays the same all the time. So don't think of it as, oh, my metabolism is just bad. Everybody's going to be slightly different. So you have to find out what works for you. All right, moving forward from there. Again, here, these are just some things that I want you to look at. Your temperature, your pulse, right? how many breaths you take per minute, your blood pressure. This is a normal value. So a normal value means that you're maintaining homeostasis. You have that balance. And if you don't have a normal value, guess what? You're going to end up with a disease, right? And I mentioned this multiple times already. So you want to make sure that that's within a normal range. And look at blood sugar. Blood sugar should also remain normal as well. So again, trying to maintain homeostasis. If your blood sugar is too high, then you have diabetes, and if your blood sugar is too low, then you're hypoglycemic. So neither of them are good. You don't want to get diseases. So if we want to avoid disease, you got to maintain homeostasis. Okay, moving forward from there. All right, so here's an example of homeostasis inside of a plant. So plants maintain homeostasis too. Here's an example. Plants, they need water, right? They need oxygen, and they need carbon dioxide. So when the plants, right, on the leaves, they actually have holes. Now, they're really small. They're microscopic. You can see them under the microscope. So let's say this is the leaf, and then there are small holes or pores. So there's these small holes, right? These small holes, they're going to allow water to go in, oxygen, right? And then carbon dioxide. Well, oxygen actually comes out of the plant, but and goes in as well. So it's a little bit of both. Water can go in and out as well. So let's say that it's a day where it's a lot of heat. It's a very hot day. So there's a lot of hot days. The plant is going to close these holes, right? The holes will be closed. Why would the holes be closed on a hot day? I want you to think about it real quick and pause the video. Okay, so if it's a hot day, the hole should be closed because the plant's going to lose water. So the plant doesn't want to lose water, so it's going to close those holes in the leaves. So these are called the stomata. It's going to close them. But maybe on a day where it's raining a lot, or maybe the plant is receiving too much water, it's going to keep those things open so more water can evaporate. So that's a way of maintaining balance inside of the body of the plant. Animals, right? How do animals maintain a balance? So a warm-blooded animal, the temperature is going to stay the same no matter what. This is an example of homeostasis, keeping a balance no matter what. So let's look at a warm-blooded animal. The bear, right? If it's winter, inside the bear's temperature is going to be the same as when it's summer. It's not going to it's not going to drastically change because the temperature is different. So I'll give you an example again, humans. If I walk outside right now, my body temperature is 98.6. If I come inside, my body temperature is 98.6. If I go and I decide to go for a jog, my body temperature is still 98.6. If it starts to be cold and it's snowing outside, my body temperature is still 98.6. This is maintaining homeostasis. No matter what's happening around me, my body is still stable. Now, cold-blooded organisms, now it's more difficult for them. They have to maintain homeostasis too, but they're going to do it in a different way, right? A cold-blooded animal, they can't control their body temperature, right? They can't. So what are they going to do? So the frog, right? Let's look at a frog. An amphibian, if it goes outside in the winter, it's just going to die. It's going to freeze to death because it can't control the body temperature. So what they do is they actually just move. They respond to their environment. They respond to the stimulus. So if a frog knows that it's going to be a cold day, they have to go and find a place that's going to be warmer for them to be able to live. If you've ever been to the zoo or you've been to a reptile exhibit, it's a really, really hot room. And those rooms are hot because you've got to keep a snake or a reptile and amphibian in warm conditions or else they will die. So they're both maintaining homeostasis. It's just that the frog has to actually move. The amphibian has to go somewhere to be able to maintain the body temperature, whereas the warm-blooded animal, they don't have to do as much work to maintain their body. Actually, all a warm-blooded animal or organism has to do to maintain their body is simply just eat. Most of the energy that a warm-blooded organism uses is just to maintain their own body heat. So think about it, right? All that food that you ate today, the purpose of that food was really just to keep your body warm. And that's how we maintain homeostasis. Okay, so a little overview of energy in human life, right? For us, like I said before, we take in food. We take in carbohydrates. We take in fats, right? This is on the bottom of page 4. And our body will use that to create energy for us. And the energy is used to produce heat so that we can stay alive. And then we also use energy for our metabolism. And metabolism also releases heat. So remember, metabolism is basically any chemical activity in our body, a chemical activity where something is being broken down or something is being put back together. And then whenever we have a chemical reaction in our body or chemical activity, we're going to produce waste. So, the two waste are carbon dioxide and water. Carbon dioxide we get rid of right away because we exhale it, and water we can get rid of through our urine. So this is basically the fuel for our body, right? Think of yourself as a car, right? In order for the car to run, you need fuel. The fuel for us is chemical energy, which is trapped in food, and our body will change it to ATP. Then that ATP is going to be used to heat up our bodies and for our body processes. And that's basically what's going to keep us running. And then our waste, right? Remember, a car has waste. Car has that smoke. Well, we have carbon dioxide too. And then we have water that we have to get rid of. So we're almost like a car. Actually, cars and any other machines that we have, they're actually designed by looking at the human body. We are the most perfect thing that exists, like the body of an organism, because everything works so efficiently. So nature has created the design for everything else that we already have. Okay, so number 12, when a person does strenuous exercise, small blood vessels or capillaries near the surface of the skin increase in diameter. So that means that they open wider, right? If something's increased in diameter, it is opening wider. This change allows the body to be cooled. Look at that word, change. So whenever the body notices that there's some kind of change, the body will respond to that change to keep you normal. And the example of this is homeostasis. The body keeping you at a normal state. So it's like, oh, this person's exercising, they're heating up. Guess what? I'm going to open up these blood vessels, release this heat, and I'm going to sweat to keep this person cool, to keep them alive. So the body is always trying to keep you alive, always trying to maintain a balance so that you don't get a disease. Number 13, organisms undergo constant chemical changes as they maintain an internal balance. Here it is, the internal balance, that's homeostasis. 14, in changing external environment, an organism must be able to maintain relatively constant internal conditions. The maintenance of a stable internal environment is known as homeostasis. Right, so this is just a big concept here. It's very repetitive. You're going to see it a lot this year, the concept of maintaining a balance. And this is actually something that's true of everything in the universe. We know that everything in the universe has to be balanced. We just know that when things get out of balance, things go wrong. And that even though things might change drastically, balance is always restored. So it's amazing how the universe works. So you can think of that in whatever way you want. Some people take on it and think about it spiritually, like maybe God is giving that balance. And some people just say, hey, this is just the way that the universe works. It's just up to you. But this is just the information, right, that we'll always have to have this balance inside our bodies, and nature also has a balance too. Okay, so how do living things get energy? Right, energy. So living things get energy from food, right? And unless you are a plant, you can receive energy from the sun to make food. So all living things need energy for life processes, and a molecule of energy that can be used by cells is called ATP. So again, the key word here is used by cells because there's different types of energy, right? We have wind. Wind is energy. Sound is energy. The sun has energy. So, none of these can be used by my cells. I can't go outside and sit in the sun and say, hey, I'm going to get energy from the sun. It doesn't work that way. I need a way to change that energy so that I can use it in my body. Living things need to use their energy. So they're not going to use wind, they're not going to use sound, and they're not going to use the sun. So what happens is the sun, right, the energy from the sun will go to a plant, and a plant is almost like a bank. So let's say that there's Japanese money, and I can't use Japanese money, so I need someone to change it to American dollars so that I can actually use it in America. So a plant, right, it's going to take the energy from the sun and it's going to change it into food that can be used by other organisms. Okay, so other organisms. Right, so when we're talking about ATP, ATP is something that can be used by cells, right? It's a form of energy that a cell can actually use for fuel, right? Here's another picture where you see the cell, right? Here's the ATP, or well, here's the food, right? So let's say here's your food. It's going to be digested. It's going to be absorbed by the cell, and it's going to go inside of the cell. And then when it goes inside, here is actually a mitochondria. I hate that they colored it green, but this is a mitochondria, and it's going to make ATP, which is energy for your cells. That's usable. All right. Let's say this is a muscle, right? The food, right? The food that you eat, it's gonna go right into those cells, and it's gonna be able to provide the muscles with the fuel that it needs to create ATP. Okay, so let's look at different types of organisms and how they obtain energy. So some organisms obtain energy from consuming food. That means that they have to eat food. They are called heterotrophs or consumers. It's the same thing. And here you go. Here we basically have the sun. The sun is not alive, right? And the sun is going to provide energy to the plant. Now, a plant is also known as an autotroph. Okay. And then these two guys, the zebra and the lion, these are heterotrophs. That means that they don't make their own food. And if you're wondering what this is a picture of, this is a picture of a food chain. This is a picture of a food chain, right? So energy flows through the ecosystem, and it flows from, it goes in order. You go from plants to herbivores to carnivores and omnivores. A herbivore only eats plants, and a carnivore only eats meat. Plants are known as autotrophs, or producers, because they produce their own food. Check out the word troph. The word troph means food. So an autotroph, they make their own food. Right? So plants are autotrophs. And plants use energy from the sun, right, to make their own food, and this is called photosynthesis. Now, the word synthesis, let's look at that, right? That means to unite, to create. So photosynthesis, you're creating something. Photo means light. So to create something from light energy, right? That's one thing about science. If you can understand the vocabulary, you're going to do very well because everything just makes common sense. Right, moving forward to the questions that are at the bottom. I apologize, I know they're a little bit difficult to read. Okay, so which term is defined as all the chemical reactions that are required to sustain life? Right, all the chemical reactions to keep something alive, that would be metabolism. Number 16, if a human system fails to function properly, right, if something fails and it's not working correctly, what is the most likely result? Well, if something's not working correctly, it's going to give you a disease. And I already said that a disease is an imbalance in homeostasis. So that's the answer right there. 17, which term includes all the activities required to keep an organism alive? I know that it's cut off from you, but you should know that it's metabolism. Everything required to keep something alive, metabolism or metabolic activities. Okay, moving forward from there. All right, chemical reactions. Okay, so a chemical reaction, again, it's basically making something new or putting something together. So a process where a substance is changed into something new by breaking chemical bonds, right? Chemical bonds, these are what keep things together. And this is something that you're doing 24/7, doing these chemical reactions in your body. All living things perform chemical reactions in their cell. And the two types of chemical reactions we have are digestion and synthesis. So we break things apart and we put things together. What kinds of things are we breaking apart and putting together? Very simple. We are breaking it apart and putting together the carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen in our bodies. And there's other elements too, but it's these things that we're constantly working with in order to make new products and take things apart. So remember, your body's like a factory. And not just your body, the body of all living things are doing this constantly. Okay, reproducing. So all living things reproduce, obviously because they want to pass on their DNA. That's what they want to do. Reproduction is not essential for the survival of an individual organism. However, it is essential for the continuation of an organism species. So I want you to write it down, and then when you're ready, you can pause it and reflect on this. What this means is that for the individual, it's not essential. That means that if, let's say, you have a dog and you fix your dog, your dog can't reproduce, will that destroy the entire species of dogs? No, it will not, right? Just because one dog or one person or one zebra or whatever can't reproduce doesn't mean that the species is doomed. However, it is essential for the continuation of a species. So if all dogs stop reproducing, if all people stopped reproducing, then we have a problem, okay? That, not being able to reproduce will not continue the species. And there are two types of reproduction. We obviously know this. There's sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction. We'll talk more about that at a later time during the year. And then last but not least, evolution. So all living things evolve. What does that mean? Well, evolution, these are small changes over long periods of time. Okay, so when we say that all living things evolve, we just means that they change. That's all. Things change. Think about it, right? You've changed since you were a child. And I think it's actually interesting that most people say, well, people that don't believe in evolution, they say, I don't believe in evolution. And I'm like, really? You don't believe that things change? You don't believe that there were dinosaurs before and now things are different? Or that even 10 years ago things were different? Evolution is a fact. It's not something that you can say, I don't believe in it. It happens. It's true. The earth is not the same. Living things are not the same as they once were. We obviously go through changes, right? But it doesn't happen right away. It takes time. So all organisms, they have adaptations, right? Because things are changing, because the earth is changing, living things have to change with it. And if they don't, then they die out. So adaptations. And many of you guys think that the word adaptation means that you're getting used to something or that you're changing automatically. And that is not true. You have to get rid of that definition, and you have to think about it in a different way if you want to get this right. So all organisms have adaptations, which are just characteristics. These are traits that help them survive better in their environment. And I know that it's on page 7, but let's look at this frog, right? What are the adaptations that the frog has? Well, it has camouflage. It's nocturnal, so it can see really well in the dark. That might help it, because at night you have a lot of insects, so it could probably eat a lot of flies and things like that. It has selective hearing. It has pads on its toes so that it can stick to the surface of anything. It has permeable skin. That means that water can be absorbed through its skin, right? I can't do that. So this is going to help them survive in the environment, right? Let's say that they live in an environment like a pond. This thing would survive really well in a pond because of all the characteristics that it has. I wouldn't survive well in a pond. And think about it, right? I'm not just going to grow camouflage and have skin that can absorb water just because I'm in a pond. That's what you guys think is, oh, I can just get these features. No, you can't. So either you have these characteristics or you don't, and the species will either become extinct or the ones with the changes will survive. It's not that anything's getting used to anything. That's not the way that it works. All right, so that's the characteristics of life. You have the vocab in the back. All of this was a basic overview of everything that we're going to cover for the year. So pretty much we're going to be going over every single one of these things that I mentioned, just in a lot more detail. Okay, and we are done.